Hello, welcome to the Roosevelt Wildlife Collections and Classroom. I'm Ron Gigerich. Let's take a tour of this fantastic new facility. This is the classroom. It's a unique classroom in that it is right next to the collection facility. It has seating for over 30 people. It's got a big sink for when doing dissections. It also has a very unique feature in that it's got modern cabinetry to hold all the specimens that are used in teaching the different vertebrate classes here in this room. We teach mammalogy, ornithology, herpetology, waterfowl biology and management, and other classes. You can see right here, in this cabinet, we've got all the waterfowl that can be found in the Atlantic flyway. Over 24 different species, both the males and the females, and some juvenile specimens. As we proceed, you'll see that the cabinets are on tracks for additional space usage, and we've got all the cabinets set up so that the different courses that are taught here already have the specimens that they need for different labs. This is the collection work area. As you see, there's a number of specimens out, but a lot of the work that goes on in here is molecular work. There are a number of new pieces of equipment. We also have 3D printers, label makers. We have a -80 freezer for tissue samples. We have a walk-in freezer around the bend for storing specimens and for integrated pest management. You'll also will see that there is a number of specimens out here today. This is the skull of a minke whale. Also down below, you'll see the jaw bones of some humpback whales and some fin whales. But as well, you'll see that there are bird eggs out on this table that were collected in the early 1900s. The collection also houses some invertebrate material, and you can see we've got some mollusk shells out on this cart. And the collection also has some very unique mounts. This one will be going back on display shortly. This is a muskox that was collected in the Northwest Territories. This is one of the vertebrate preparation areas. You can see right here, this is a bison skull that came in recently. We did a final washing of it here. These specimens are typically cleaned by water maceration, or they go into our bug colony. This specimen came to us and it was quite moldy, so we had to do a wash of it. You can see we've got this very large and deep stainless steel sink. It really facilitates the cleaning of larger specimens. We've actually done a black bear here that we've made a full skeleton of. This is the walk-in freezer that I've mentioned that we use to store specimens and to put specimens in occasionally to make sure that they are clean of insect pests. It can go down to 40 degrees, and we keep a daily log of the temperature. This is the collection room. It houses 96 Delta cabinets. We house the birds on my right, and we house the mammals on the left. I'd like to give you a tour of some of these cabinets. They're all on rollers, so they're compactor cabinets, so we can put more of them in here for additional space. You can see that they're a full 8 feet tall. There's different size drawers to house the different size specimens. It's a very extensive collection. Like most university collections, we mainly represent the vertebrates from our area, so the Northeast United States, but we have exotic specimens from all around the world. We're in the aisle that houses the carnivora of the mammals. It includes things like striped skunks, all the mustelids, mink, fisher, but we also have the bears down this aisle. We've got the Persians, the raccoons, we've got the canids, the wolves, and the foxes. But I'd like to show you these skunks. These specimens are all prepared in a very similar manner in all collections. When the specimen comes in to the Roosevelt Wildlife Collection facility, we do a necropsy on it, and we fill out a specimen data sheet. We take various measurements, we look for ectoparasites, endoparasites, and we write down anything unique that we find out about the animal. In the case of the mammals, we typically remove their skulls and clean their skulls. For years, the skull was used to take morphological measurements to determine the different species and subspecies of mammals. Today, through the advancement of molecular biology, we can look at tissue samples or blood to determine different species or subspecies. I'd like to open up one more drawer just to show you the vast variation in skunk pelages. You can see we've got skunks that showing very little white stripes to very, very large white stripes. These are all striped skunks, and you can see that they're all individuals. Now let's take a look at a larger specimen that's a member of the carnivora. Here's a polar bear, quite a large vertebrate. In this cabinet we have a few of our bear specimens. Up above you can see the skulls of black bears, grizzly bears here in the collection. I'd like to take you through one more cabinet in this aisle just to show you some of the canids in the collection. That would be the foxes and the wolves. You could see that the cabinets are really designed for easy use. They have heavy metal drawers for holding the specimens. Here we're looking at gray foxes, which are very common in the lower 48 states, and very common right here in central New York. Not uncommon to actually see one run through the campus on any given night. You can see down here some skeletal material. Also, here's a look at the full skeleton of a coyote. Next, I'd like to take you down the aisle where we house the marine mammals. In 2015, I cleaned 15 marine mammals for the college. They vary in size from as small as a harbor porpoise to as large as a pilot whale. Let's walk down there. In 2014, we acquired 15 marine mammals that only had a necropsy performed on them, so the bodies were basically still frozen and intact out at the Massachusetts Oceanographic Institute. Here is a pilot whale, which was the largest of the 15 marine mammals that I cleaned. This specimen, when it was alive, was about 15 feet long. We're actually looking at the top of the skull. There's its blowholes. So there's a lot of mass in the way of collagen and muscle up here in the top of the head of a pilot whale. What I'd also like to show you of this pilot whale is some vertebrae. And in my right hand, I have a couple back vertebrae that you can see, they look pretty much like we know vertebrae tend to look. But here in my left hand, and I'll put these vertebrae down, you can see here's a pair of vertebrae that obviously were damaged at some point in time. Maybe the whale got hit by a boat, but he had some sort of strike, and the bones were broken. And you can see all the additional calcification that takes place when an animal in the wild gets a bone break. Let's look at another marine mammal that I cleaned in 2015. It's a rhizodolphin, a fairly large specimen. And you can see I left parts of the vertebrae still intact. And you'll see that the oil will come out of the bones and will discolor them. One of the reasons I left this specimen still partially intact is so that down the road, in a few years, if we want to re-articulate it, when I clean these different sections, I won't have to work as hard determining which are the cervical vertebrae, the thoracic, the lumbar, and caudal. Let's take a look at his skull. You can see when they do necropsies at the lab, Oceanographic Institute, that they take off the back of the skull. They like to be able to look at the brain. But otherwise, the specimens are completely intact. Now let's look at a whale specimen. During the same time period, we acquired 4 whale specimens from the assistant director to Fish and Wildlife out in Massachusetts. He had already cleaned the specimens, so this was nice to get these already prepared and clean. Here we're looking at the bones that you'd find in the fins of a humpback whale. We often don't think that the fins of a whale or of a porpoise or a dolphin have the same sort of bones that we have. They have phalanges just like we do. Not always the same number, but they have bones very similar to us. All the whales and dolphins, they don't have hind legs, but they do have the same bones that we have in our arms or the other animals' forelegs. Let's take a look at a few other bones. Again, this is a humpback whale. This is one of its ribs. This is L7. You can see rather large. These were juvenile humpbacks. They were about 24, 25 feet long. Typical adult humpback whale will grow up to 40 feet. As we look at these, here's a look at a back vertebrae. This is actually a cervical vertebrae. Whales typically have 300 bones. A human has 206. The additional bones can be found within the vertebrae. As we all know, they tend to be very, very long animals. And whales also have chevron bones for additional muscle attachment down in their lumbar and tail region. As I mentioned about the whales having phalanges in their fins, just like we have phalanges in our hand, they also have the same bones that we would find in our lower and upper arm. Here's a right ulnar that we would find right here in our arm, but here's a whale right ulnar. You've already seen some eggs out in the prep room that are being cataloged. Here I'd like to show you how the eggs are housed. In my hand is an ostrich egg. You can see quite a large egg. We've got eggs mainly from North America, but as I told you earlier, we have exotics from around the world for various species. You can see some marine bird eggs. They're interesting in that they tend to come to more of a point. A lot of marine birds nest on cliffs, and they don't want the egg to roll off. So the egg, if it starts to roll, will roll in a circular motion. All bird species have an AOU number. That corresponds to the species itself. And here, in the case of the loggerhead shrike, we see its AOU number, 622. That is written on the egg itself in pencil. And now we know, if we pick up the egg, which species it is. Also, eggs are typically collected in the manner that you collect the whole clutch. So here, the loggerhead shrike had a clutch of 5 eggs. We know where and when it was collected on the card, but we also write on the eggs a number. There's 5 eggs, 1 of 5, 2 of 5, 3 of 5, 4 of 5, 5 of 5. Okay, when you have bird eggs, you have bird specimens. I'd like to show you some passerines. We have over 1,600 bird specimens that were collected around 140 years ago. Plus, we're always adding bird specimens to the collection. But let's take a look at one of the old bird specimens in the collection. This is a Baltimore oriole, collected in 1878 by G.B. Sudworth. We happen to have his collection. These were collected out in Michigan. As I mentioned earlier, most of our collection is of Northeast United States specimens, but we've got some fine collections collected in other areas of the country. The nice thing about having all these specimens is, besides the ability that we can actually show students specimens of a different species when they're learning in ornithology or any of the other disciplines, is that the specimens themselves also give us a record that the species was in a certain place at a certain point in time in our country. We know that there's been a lot of habitat change to North America over 100 years. Here are some sparrow specimens. And you can see there's numerous species of sparrows, and they're well represented in the Roosevelt Wildlife Collection. The Roosevelt Wildlife Station has been on campus since 1919. It's been housed in different buildings, different rooms, and this $3.5 million facility enabled us to have a state-of-the-art teaching and research facility for both our undergraduate and graduate students that brings us into the future. I hope you've enjoyed the tour today, and you can find out more about us online, and I thank you for your time.